Imagine walking through a dense prehistoric forest, thinking you're the only human alive. But suddenly, you notice footprints. Not of animals, but of other beings, human-like, yet not quite the same. For most of history, we thought Homo sapiens stood alone, but new ancient DNA research reveals a startling truth. We were never alone on Earth. Other human species walked beside us, loved, hunted, and even shared their genes with us. The question is, what happened to them, and why are we the only ones left? For decades, the story of human evolution was taught like a straight line, almost like a ladder. At the bottom stood primitive apes, then came early hominins, and finally, the proud figure of Homo sapiens at the top. Simple, clean, and comforting. But the truth? Far messier, far more fascinating, and far more unsettling. When scientists first uncovered fossils like those of Homo erectus or Australopithecus, the assumption was that one species replaced the other in a neat succession. One vanished, the next appeared, and the story marched forward. But ancient DNA research has shattered that tidy narrative. Instead of a straight line, our past looks more like a tangled family tree, with branches that crossed, intertwined, and sometimes broke off suddenly. Take Neanderthals, for example. Long painted as brutish cavemen, they weren't just a failed experiment in evolution. They thrived across Europe and Western Asia for hundreds of thousands of years. Then there are the Denisovans, a mysterious human group discovered not through full skeletons, but from tiny fragments like a finger bone and a tooth, later decoded by DNA sequencing. And let's not forget the hobbits of Flores, or even Homo naledi from South Africa, each rewriting what it means to be human. Welcome to Before Flame. Fire if you enjoyed traveling back in time with me. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you never miss the next journey into our ancient past. What ancient DNA revealed was stunning. These species weren't just neighbors, they were part of us. They met us, lived alongside us, and in some cases, had children with us. Which means, in a very real sense, they never entirely disappeared. Pieces of them live on in our genes today. This raises a haunting question. If we weren't alone back then, what was it like to share the Earth with other kinds of humans? Imagine walking across Ice Age Europe 50,000 years ago. You wouldn't just meet bands of Homo sapiens like yourself. In the dense forests or rocky valleys, you might stumble upon Neanderthals, stocky, muscular, and well adapted to the cold. Their tools, homes, and even jewelry suggest a sophistication long underestimated. These weren't mindless brutes, they were intelligent, emotional, and possibly even spiritual. Meanwhile, far to the east, another group quietly thrived, the Denisovans. We still know little about what they looked like because their fossils are so scarce. Yet their DNA lingers in millions of people today, particularly among populations in Asia and Oceania. From just a tooth and a finger bone, scientists unraveled the presence of an entire human branch that had been hiding in our genetic shadows all along. And then there's the island of Flores in Indonesia, home to Homo floresiensis, the so-called hobbits. Barely over 3 feet tall, with brains the size of a grapefruit, they challenge our assumptions about what it takes to survive. Despite their size, they hunted, used tools, and lived successfully in their own environment. All of this paints a picture of a world teeming with diversity, not just animals and plants, but multiple kinds of humans. Some tall, some short, some robust, some delicate. For a time, Earth wasn't ruled by a single species but was shared by cousins who were strikingly similar, yet profoundly different. But here's the kicker, we didn't just coexist, we connected. Ancient DNA proves that our encounters with these cousins went beyond simple competition. We mingled, exchanged genes, and changed the course of human evolution forever. So how much of them still lives in us? When scientists first discovered that Neanderthal DNA still lives within us, it was nothing short of a bombshell. The long-standing idea was that Neanderthals went extinct while Homo sapiens thrived, a clean break, one species replacing another. But DNA shattered that neat narrative. Here's what the evidence tells us. Every person of non-African descent today carries between 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA. For some, it influences traits like immune response, hair, even skin tone. In a very real sense, Neanderthals never completely vanished. Pieces of them are alive inside us, quietly shaping who we are. But they're not the only ones. Populations in Oceania, such as Melanesians, carry up to 6% Denisovan DNA. That means entire genetic legacies were passed down through encounters thousands of years ago. It wasn't just one meeting in the wilderness. It happened multiple times, in different places, over thousands of years. This forces us to rethink what being human means. We're not a single, pure line of evolution. We're a mosaic, a patchwork quilt woven together from different branches of the human tree. Each piece tells a story of migration, survival, and adaptation. Think about it. The strong immune systems that helped us resist ancient diseases, the ability to thrive in high altitudes like the Himalayas, these are gifts from our cousins. Without them, Homo sapiens might not have flourished the way we did. So, when we look in the mirror today, we're not just seeing one species. We're seeing echoes of others, Neanderthals, Denisovans, and perhaps even more undiscovered relatives, all stitched into our DNA. And this is just the beginning. Because if DNA reshaped our family tree, the next big question is, what happened when these worlds collided? Picture this, two groups of humans standing face to face on a windswept plain. On one side, Homo sapiens, smaller in number but armed with new tools, sharper weapons, and an evolving knack for symbolic thought. On the other, Neanderthals, robust, physically powerful, and perfectly adapted to Europe's harsh Ice Age environment. For thousands of years, these encounters weren't just fleeting. They were moments of tension, curiosity, cooperation, and sometimes, competition. Archaeological evidence shows that Neanderthals and Homo sapiens lived side by side in parts of Europe and the Middle East for more than 5,000 years. That's not a quick passing, that's generations of overlap. So what happened in those encounters? The evidence paints a complex picture. In some places, there are signs of conflict, overlapping hunting grounds, competition for scarce resources, and weapons left behind. Yet in other places, there's evidence of cultural exchange. Similar stone tools, shared fire pits, and even decorative items hinting at communication and imitation. And then, of course, there's the DNA evidence. Proof that some of these meetings were far more intimate. These weren't just rivals. Sometimes they were partners, parents, and family. The legacy of those encounters lives inside ourselves today. But make no mistake, coexistence didn't mean equality. Neanderthals, despite their strength and resilience, began to dwindle as Homo sapiens expanded. Why? Was it climate change that weakened them? Was it direct conflict? Or was it simply that our ancestors had a survival edge, creativity, adaptability, and larger social networks? Whatever the reason, these face-to-face encounters marked one of the most pivotal chapters in human history. The moment when multiple human species walked the Earth together, sharing the same landscapes, yet fighting for the same future. If we think of the Stone Age as a vast stage, then Neanderthals and Homo sapiens weren't the only players. Enter the Denisovans, a mysterious group discovered not through complete skeletons, but through fragments, a finger bone, a tooth, and above all, their DNA. What makes Denisovans fascinating is how far their genetic legacy stretches. They lived across Asia, perhaps adapting to environments from Siberia's frozen tundra to the high-altitude plateaus of Tibet. Their DNA survives in modern populations of Oceania, Southeast Asia, and parts of East Asia. In fact, if you're able to breathe easily in the thin air of the Himalayas, you may have Denisovans to thank. They pass down a gene that enhances oxygen use at high altitudes. This discovery flips the old story on its head. For years, archaeologists thought evolution was a straight path. One species replaces another, moving ever forward. But the reality looks more like a web, where groups diverge, meet again, intermix, and leave lasting marks on one another. And here's the remarkable part. Homo sapiens didn't just encounter these other groups, we absorbed them. Their DNA became part of our story. Traits that helped them survive became part of our evolutionary toolkit. But that doesn't mean it was always peaceful. The overlap in territories, the need for food, and the unpredictability of nature would have created friction. Every hunt, every migration route, every water source could spark tension between groups. And yet, somehow, enough cooperation and connection occurred that their genetic signatures remain alive today. In this way, the Denisovans remind us of something crucial. Humanity's survival wasn't just about eliminating rivals, it was about becoming them too. The coexistence of multiple human species raises one haunting question. Why are we the only ones left? Neanderthals, Denisovans, and other archaic humans had survived for hundreds of thousands of years before Homo sapiens entered the scene. Yet within a relatively short period, they vanished, leaving us as the last branch standing. Scientists debate the reasons, and the answers may not be simple. One possibility is climate change. Ice Age cycles brought brutal swings in temperature, shrinking forests and grasslands, and stressing animal populations. Neanderthals and Denisovans, though highly adapted, may not have been flexible enough when their environments shifted rapidly. Another factor could be competition. Homo sapiens traveled in larger social groups, shared resources more widely, and developed more complex tools and symbolic communication. This adaptability, the ability to innovate, cooperate, and imagine, may have given us the edge in survival. And then there's interbreeding. The DNA inside us suggests that these groups didn't simply disappear, they became part of us. Rather than a clean extinction, it was absorption, their genes living on within ours, even as their separate identities faded from the archaeological record. What's most striking is that their disappearance wasn't immediate. For thousands of years, we coexisted. There were shared fires, mixed families, and rival hunts. But gradually, one by one, the other species dwindled. By 40,000 years ago, Homo sapiens stood alone, not because we were the chosen species, but because we were the most adaptable. So the story of survival wasn't just about dominance. It was about resilience, adaptability, and an unbroken thread of connection to the cousins who shaped us. When you think of DNA, it might feel abstract, invisible codes hidden deep inside our cells. But in reality, DNA is like a time capsule, carrying messages from ancestors who walked the earth tens of thousands of years ago. And thanks to modern science, we're learning that those messages are still shaping us today. Take immunity, for example. Researchers have found that certain Neanderthal genes influence how our immune system responds to disease. In a world where infections could mean life or death, inheriting those genes was like being handed a survival toolkit. Even today, some of those same genes may affect how we react to viruses or bacteria. But it's not all advantages. Some inherited traits come with trade-offs. Certain Neanderthal genes have been linked to modern conditions like allergies, blood clotting disorders, and even depression. In other words, the past still echoes in both our strengths and vulnerabilities. Denisovan DNA, too, left its mark. One of the most famous examples is a gene that helps people in Tibet and surrounding regions live at extreme altitudes, where oxygen is scarce. Without this adaptation, human settlement in such places might have been impossible. That's not just survival, that's thriving in environments once thought unlivable. So, our DNA is more than a biological script. It's a storybook written by countless ancestors, some of whom no longer exist as separate species but continue to live through us. Every adaptation, every mutation, every borrowed gene was part of the grand experiment of human survival. And as science advances, the picture grows clearer. Our identity as Homo sapiens isn't singular. It's a tapestry woven from many threads, each strand belonging to a cousin we once walked alongside. The deeper scientists dig into our genetic code, the more unexpected connections emerge. It turns out, our ancient cousins didn't just influence our biology. They may have shaped our behavior, health, and even the way our bodies look today. For instance, some studies suggest Neanderthal DNA contributes to differences in skin tone, hair type, and how our bodies respond to sunlight. That makes sense. Neanderthals evolved in Ice Age Europe, where sunlight was scarce, so their genetic adaptations helped regulate vitamin D production. When Homo sapiens interbred with them, those traits spread into new populations, allowing us to thrive in colder climates. There's also evidence that these ancient genes affect metabolism. Imagine early humans struggling to survive brutal winters or periods of famine. Genes that stored fat more efficiently could mean the difference between life and death. Fast forward to today, in a world of constant food abundance, and those same genes might predispose us to obesity or diabetes. Evolution doesn't always predict the future, it just responds to the present. Even mental health carries echoes of this legacy. Certain genetic variants linked to mood disorders or addictive tendencies may trace back to our interbreeding past. These traits weren't necessarily flaws back then. They may have been tied to creativity, risk-taking, or heightened awareness, qualities that had survival value in dangerous environments. In other words, our modern lives are still shaped by choices and encounters from over 40,000 years ago. The genes we carry are a living record of not just survival, but adaptation, blending, and reinvention. And perhaps the most humbling lesson is this: we're not the pure humans we once imagined. We're hybrids, the sum of many vanished worlds, stitched together in our DNA. The story of ancient DNA leaves us with a profound realization. Humans were never alone, and in a sense, we still aren't. Every heartbeat we feel today carries traces of others who once walked the same earth: Neanderthals, Denisovans, and perhaps even more undiscovered cousins. Their legacy is not buried in the past. It's alive inside us. Think about what that means. The resilience that allowed us to survive new climates. The creativity that gave rise to tools, art, and language. Even the struggles we face today, with our health, emotions, and bodies, are part of a chain stretching back through countless generations. We are not just Homo sapiens. We are a living mosaic of ancient humanity. This truth changes how we see ourselves. Evolution wasn't a simple ladder, with one species replacing another in neat succession. It was a branching web of contact, conflict, cooperation, and connection. Instead of one story, there were many, and together they became us. And perhaps that's the most human lesson of all. Survival was never about being isolated or pure. It was about blending, sharing, and adapting. The very fact that we exist today proves that cooperation, even at the genetic level, was as essential as competition. So the next time you hear someone say humans conquered the earth alone, remember the DNA in your veins tells a different story. A story of companionship, rivalry, and shared survival. A story where we were never truly alone. When we peel back the layers of history, one truth becomes clear. Humanity's story was never written by Homo sapiens alone. It was shaped in the shadows of firelight, on shared hunting grounds, and in whispered exchanges between different human species who left their mark not only on the land, but on us. We are not a single thread of evolution. We are a tapestry, woven with strands of Neanderthal strength, Denisovan resilience, and the ingenuity of countless others whose names we may never know. Their DNA still guides our bodies, our minds, and perhaps even our destiny. And yet, in a world obsessed with division, this story reminds us that our very existence is built on connection. Cooperation, exchange, and adaptation weren't optional, they were survival. Without them, there would be no us. So here's the challenge. If ancient DNA could shape the humans we became, what could the choices we make today shape in the humans of tomorrow?